Welcome in STEM for Girls members. This is our second virtual session of STEM for Girls Summer Summit 2023. If you happen to miss our first session with Callie Stone, our geologist, that recording is now available in the STEM for Girls Clubhouse and also on YouTube. So you can jump on over, check it out. And when you watch it all the way to the end, you'll notice there's a QR code that you can scan, and that actually enters you for a chance to win one of our hoodies. So if you haven't seen it, pop on over, take a look at that. And you can see here on the bottom of our screen, we have our sessions listed for the rest of the summer. So today we're joined by Brauweiler. We're going to be joined by Melissa Barton on August 9th. And then at the end of August, we're still waiting for our date. It's actually pending on NASA, which is super exciting. We're actually going to be meeting up with an astronaut that's on the International Space Station. So stay tuned for the date. That will be all on our social media as usual. I'm going to go through a couple key items just before we jump over and chat a little bit more with Ashley. So while we're meeting on a virtual platform today, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today, and which we each call home. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining today from the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, and we acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Beothuk, the Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. So as I mentioned, we're going to be giving away STEM for Girls hoodies. These have been frequently requested pieces of swag on top of our hats and everything else. So we actually got around finally to putting them together. So we have a nice white one with our colored logo. We have a black one with our white logo. You get to choose if you win. We are going to be drawing one after each virtual session. So like I said, stick around until the end. There'll be a QR code. Go ahead, scan it, super quick survey, and then you're entered for a chance to win. Before we dig into our next session, I wanted to take a chance just to preface our conversations today are about women and girls in STEM and skilled trades. And when we talk about girls in skilled trades and women in skilled trades and science, we're specifically talking about an inclusive definition of women and girls. And we welcome anybody joining us today who are wanting to learn more about our role models, working in the STEM sectors, things like that. So a little bit about WRDC. So this is our parent organization. For anyone joining us, WRDC, or Women in Resource Development Corporation, they're a provincial nonprofit organization committed to increasing women's participation in technology and skilled trades. And we actually celebrated our 25th anniversary last year. So as an organization, we offer a lot of programs. We do career exploration. So that's here at STEM for Girls. We do programming, education, outreach. We also do career development and employment assistance. So this is for anyone when they're finishing high school, getting ready to move into the workforce, college, university. We're kind of here to help you through that process. We also do equity, diversity, and inclusion consultation. So this is for businesses, professionals who are wanting to ensure that their businesses are inclusive and diverse. And then we also do research, collaboration, and partnerships. So this is also a big part of making sure we're identifying solutions to any challenges we might be facing or women and gender diverse people may be facing in STEM and skilled trades fields. So as I mentioned, STEM for Girls is a charitable organization, which means it's made possible by strong community partners and sponsors. So listed here are our generous partners, and it's also made possible by our role models. So these amazing companies support this program because they know their investment in girls and gender diverse youth is an investment in STEM innovation. It takes a community to create lasting change. We see that firsthand here at STEM for Girls. So for anyone watching this, if you're interested in joining us as a partner, a sponsor, a role model, we're always looking to add to the community, so you can just reach on out. For anyone who's joining who is not yet a member, we get this question all the time. It's not too late. Super easy. We're always welcoming new members to STEM for Girls. So you can actually go ahead and scan the QR code here on the screen, and it'll take you straight to the registration page. And it's provided at no charge. So all our programming, our videos of sessions, all of our materials and activities we send out free of charge, thanks to our sponsors. And it's open to girls and gender diverse youth within Newfoundland between the ages of 11 and 18. All right, so Now that we're ready to jump into our session, I'm actually going to get ready to hand it over to our Sim for Girls role model, Ashley Brauweiler. So let's just do a quick switcheroo. I'm going to stop my screen. And Ashley, you can share yours. So you just need to hit the share button on the bottom. Perfect. You're sharing screen. Now you might just need to pull up your presentation. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, awesome. Can you see it like the whole screen, or do I have to hit play there? Guess I have to hit play. How's that? Is it sideways?
No, it's good. It's good our way, actually.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name, obviously, thank you, Ashley, for that, is Ashley Brauweiler, and I am a meteorologist with CBC Newfoundland and Labrador right now. Let's just start from the beginning. So I grew up in Welland, Ontario. It's a small community or town in southern Ontario, which is about 20 minutes from Niagara Falls, if you don't know where Welland is. And I found my love of meteorology in my career when I was only 5 years old. So I was quite young when I found that. What happened was I was scared of thunderstorms as a kid, and I wanted to know more about them, and so that I wasn't really afraid of them anymore. So that's kind of where that passion grew and continued as I grew up in my teenage years. And another part of that was the fact that I got my pilot's license, my glider pilot's license. There's a picture there of me in one of them. I was an air cadet as a kid. So that really started my, flying and all that sort of stuff. And I currently have a little more personal. I have two beagles. You can see them there. That's Drizzle and Stevie. Drizzle is on your left and Stevie is on your right. And we rescued them from Beagle Paws. And that is my wife, Deb Thomas. She and I married in 2022. So found her here in St. John's, which was really cool. And the other thing, my passion for flying is probably as high as my passion for meteorology, although I haven't flown in quite a while. But one of the biggest, most exciting experiences of my personal life, I would say, is this. I got to fly with the snowbirds back in 2016. So here's a little video of how cool it is. Give me a few seconds to see that. So we're in formation here over Yellowknife. I got to fly with them when I was in Yellowknife. So that was pretty cool. And then as far as my career is concerned, I did school, obviously through high school, then went to university. I have a degree in physics and also a certificate in meteorology. And I started my career as an operational forecaster with Amex. Some of you may know that company. It's fairly popular here in St. John's, but I worked in the Ottawa Bureau and I was there for 3 years. That's basically where I cut my teeth as a meteorologist. I learned how to forecast, and then my dream job was to work in TV, and I finally got that dream job back in 2015 with CBC North. So I moved to Yellowknife, and I was there forecasting for essentially the top half of the country for about 3 years, and then eventually moved here to St. John's. And let me tell you, some of the wildest weather I have ever experienced and forecasted for pretty much as soon as I got here. 2020, a year later, I suppose, 2020 with Snowmageddon, Larry not short after that, and then obviously Port aux Basques, which I'm sure many of you remember there. That was, I'd say, one of the biggest storms of my career, and going forward now, I don't think that they're going to be my last, that's for sure, especially with climate change. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I don't know how to go back to my camera. You
Up
are
top,
muted.
you should have a way to end your screen share.
Okay. I got to go back to it. Okay, I see. Stop share. Perfect. Okay, there we go. I mean, I work in TV, but technology with this.
It's a whole other thing. Hey, I get it. Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
I have to ask just because I was watching that video.
Yeah.
And for anyone that's watching, like we have a lot of members actually who have been really, really interested in pursuing like flight school or learning how to fly, if it's commercial or for pleasure, for whatever. How do you go about like that process? Like I know obviously in Ontario it might be quite different, here in Newfoundland, vice versa, but like it seems so daunting, like being able to, like, I'm assuming you don't start out by flying your first plane just right off the get-go by yourself, right? I'm assuming you're in there with somebody.
Yeah, exactly. So, as an air cadet, I mean, really, it depends on how old you are to start, but that is a really good place to get your license. You can start out as a glider pilot. You'll go to a school in the summer. Essentially, well, you got to start doing flight school first. It's ground school is what it's called. And then you'll go and you'll do your pilot's license, your glider pilot's license. And then the next year you can do your regular pilot's license. Now that's basically a scholarship. Essentially, it's a $10,000 to $20,000 scholarship that you'll do because it's not cheap to fly. And lots of people will tell you there is a Gander flight school, which you can also go to. And then if you want to go the military route there, if you want to fly with the snowbirds, or you want to be an F-18 pilot or an F-16 pilot, or even like if you want to fly Hercs and all that sort of stuff, Coast Guard also has planes, which I know doesn't sound, but they all have a division. And so there's so many ways of doing it. It's not daunting. It's just like any other school. Like I said, you're going to start. It's called from the ground up, essentially.
Right.
And you'll start reading a book. You'll learn all the basics. You'll learn meteorology is a big part of flying. That's another reason why I think it kind of went hand in hand for me to be a pilot and a meteorologist at the same time. So that's how you would do it. But there are many, many, many avenues to get there. There's not one right way to get there. There's not one wrong way to get there. It's just getting there.
Which is great. And I think that's a concern a lot of our students have, especially as they get up into high school. I feel like they start to worry about, we have students who reach out and say, hey, I'm really interested in going into medicine or what have you, a STEM or skill trade. And they say, oh, I don't really like this. Or, we get a lot of people say, oh, I don't really like math. And I say, well, there's definitely lots of different ways to approach those kinds of things, right? So in like, I know you mentioned you've known since you were very little that you were interested in the weather and things like that. In high school, what would you say was your approach? Like, did you go in and did you like love science courses, or was it, more so something you were okay with doing? Like what was your favorite subject, and what was something that you didn't really enjoy?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Honestly, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, it's really all about the teacher to me.
Yeah.
And to be completely honest, I didn't have a great math teacher in high school, and I didn't like math, but I had to do it. So I did it, and you'll get through it. I knew that that's my stepping stone. That's how I was going to get to be a meteorologist. And that was my dream. And I was just going to keep on keeping on. And I had no choice really at this point. You'll learn to love it.
Yeah.
It will, there are parts of you that are like, am I really going to use this in my career? You will, I promise, in one way or another, whether it's, I don't know, some university course or whatever. You're like, oh yeah, I remember I had to do this. And it all makes sense eventually. It will make sense. It may not at the moment, but it will make sense eventually. So my favorite, what was my favorite subject? I wouldn't say it was physics, and I ended up getting a degree in physics, but there were some cool parts of physics. Like I got to do optics, which was a really fun course. And I also in university got to do like an analog course where I actually made an anemometer. An anemometer measures the wind speed. So I actually made it and calibrated it and coded it. It was really cool. So you'll always find, something in one of your courses. And to me, finding that and really hanging on to it is what gets you through.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think it's definitely true. Like, I'm a high school teacher originally, and I think like it's, getting in there and depending on the teacher, depending on your attitude, like those are all really, really big components of, how the directions you can go in, right? Absolutely.
Absolutely. And really, yeah, like your attitude towards stuff. If you don't want to do something and you don't want to be there, it's probably not going to work out, right? You have to want to be there and find a reason to be there. I think that that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Especially with STEM, it's not easy.
No, and that's the thing. Like, so that kind of leads me to my next question. Here at STEM for Girls, we try our best to address and really find solutions for a lot of the barriers, like women and, like as a queer person, I know like I talk to a lot of our students who are, two-spirit LGBTQIA and, the struggles that they're going to face going into, especially really, traditionally male dominated careers. How have you found it, like, I guess, originally with your degree in physics, but then also just moving into meteorology? Did you find that there were any challenges or struggles with that?
I was one of two girls that graduated in my physics class. And then when I went on to meteorology, my certificate in meteorology, I was one of three. So it was very male dominated. And you find I don't even think, I think I had two female teachers. I may have had two female teachers. I can't really remember. That was a long time ago. But yeah, it's very male dominated. So I think, trying to you constantly feel like you have to prove yourself that you can do it, that, to be taken seriously, especially in my career now, even like to think about, people just think I'm the weather girl, and I'm not the weather girl. I'm actually a meteorologist. I actually have a degree in science. I know what I'm talking about, like I'm not just the weather girl, and there's nothing wrong with being just the weather girl, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, so the challenge has been trying to get people to take you seriously, and proving that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So yeah, though other than that, the barriers, whatever, kind of came about, I just kind of kept pushing through. One door would close. Nope, this is what I really want to do. I'm going to do it. And then eventually another door would open. It's just basically staying positive and going for what you want. It's so important to just continue to go for what you want, because it will happen. It will happen.
Mm-hmm. And I think that like that perseverance and that resilience is so key, like you said, especially in, we connect with and work with at WRDC a lot of women who are in, very male dominated careers, especially within skilled trades. And a lot of them will say, you know what, it's getting knocked down, 10 times and getting up 10 times. It's that whole idea of like, I want to be here. I have the right to be here, and it's tricky. So when it comes to those challenges, Ashley, do you find is there any advice you would give? Like if someone had come to you, if it was a young woman or gender diverse individual who came to you and said, hey, I'm about to finish high school, like what advice would you give me, as someone who kind of wants to follow in your footsteps, who wants to do, what you've done, pursue the education and the career, the direction you've gone in?
Yeah. Research, honestly, is, I from a young, like I said, from a young age, knew that I wanted to be a meteorologist, but I didn't know what a meteorologist actually did, right? You don't know. So I ended up, making plans to meet with Environment Canada. I went to Toronto. I lived in Southern Ontario, so it was about an hour and a half away. But I contacted people in Environment Canada and I said, hey, is it cool if I come in, look around, ask you a few questions just to see if that's what I want to do? I contacted the Weather Network. I did the same thing. Went in there, had conversations with them, kind of made connections. And I was 12 to 15 years old. Like I wasn't a teenager. I guess I was a teenager, but I wasn't in my 20s. Let's just say that. And afterwards, once I actually became a meteorologist, the one guy I contacted, actually, I still talk to him at Environment Canada. He's like, you actually became a meteorologist. And he's like, I've never had anyone come in and request to come see anybody other than you. And he's like, it's amazing, So I think figuring out, all the different possibilities, because, if you're an engineer, for example, there are so many disciplines within engineering, so many different ways you can take engineering. And same thing with meteorology, an operational forecaster. It's not just weather, right? There's ice forecasting, there's TV broadcasting, there's operational forecasting, which is what I was doing. So I was working for AMEC, and I was forecasting lightning across Ontario, well, across the entire country for the hydro. Because if there's lightning in some area, they need to know to change from one transformer to another, so that just in case that one blows up, it gets hit by lightning, they're still going to be able to get electricity. So there's so many different ways that you can be a meteorologist, and weather plays an important role in all of it. So I think, just doing your research, figuring out that that's really what you want, because sometimes you go to school and then you go do the job and you're like, well, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, So and it's easy stuff, right? You just contact somebody or do something. I mean, I know with meteorology, it's easy because you just contact a meteorologist, right? But there's always some pretty cool things, more than likely, that you can do, especially with science. There's so many different cool things you can be involved in.
And then with regards to like specifically your work, would you say there is, I know this is a tricky question sometimes, but would you say there's like a typical day in your job? Like when you talk about specifically what you do now, and specifically like for somebody who was interested in going to meteorology, I guess, is there like a typical day, or does it really depend on the area you're in and and the things you focus on?
Yeah, I think broadcast meteorology kind of, depending on where you are in the country, is fairly similar. We start our day, most of us anyway, for CBC, we start our day, well, all the meteorologists that I know, we're a pretty tight group, just because there's really only 7 or 8 of us across the country that work for CBC. But so I start the day by coming in. Normally I would go and I'd look at the forecast. I haven't been at work for a week in a little bit because I was on vacation. So I really have to wrap my head around what just happened over the last little bit. And then, kind of what's going forward. We'll sit in a morning meeting normally, and that's when we'll talk about assignments, what people are doing. And if there's something special going on at night, an evening event or something, then, maybe I'll be live out there, or I'll be, whatever, probably doing something outside if it's beautiful. And then I do radio hits. So I have to prepare all of those. I typically do my forecasting in the afternoon once I have all of my newest forecast models, because I don't want to be doing the forecasts with old data. And and then I get ready for TV. So I'll do a radio hit again in the evening. I get ready for TV, and then we go live at 6:00, 5:59. And then I have a number of hits through the show. And normally that's where I tell my weather story. And then that's it. That's the end of the day. But, there's been lots of extreme weather. For example, Port aux Basques, I was down there for the actual storm. So I was reporting, essentially played a different role. So I was reporting what I was seeing, what was happening, and, weather-wise, what we would see going forward. And I was doing that for national news and stuff. So depending on the storm, depending on the day-to-day, what's going on, I either am forecasting weather, which to me is the most important part, going and leading to the event. And then during the event is letting people know what's going on and then what's coming. I remember with Larry, I don't know if you guys remember Hurricane Larry. It was back in, I think, 2021. And it was in September, and it was on a weekend. And so it happened, it was coming through at night. And I remember people were sending me messages because I was constantly on Twitter updating, and people were scared, right? And so I was like updating them, and they were saying, oh, you being present and telling me what was going to happen so that I wasn't scared anymore was really important. So, I just think it's, that's my day to day. So basically it changes depending on the weather situation.
And I'm really happy you mentioned that last part, because I think a lot of students that we chat with are worried that when they go into STEM fields specifically, that they're losing the people component. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I've got to go into the humanities, I've got to go into the arts to be able to connect with people and help people and create change. And it's so interesting, because even just hearing about like what you said, being able to be there to provide really crucial, regarding safety and well-being of people information, That to me is just like is mind blowing, right? Because that is a real game changer, especially for people in rural, remote communities, like being able to connect with people and let them know, like, I know it's that in itself is creating that change. A lot of our students want to do that. They're worried, oh, if I get into STEM, it's just going to be sitting in a lab somewhere and I'm going to be covered in, surrounded by beakers. And so I'm glad you mentioned that. It's amazing to hear.
Yeah, it is. It's super important. That connection 100% is important. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so with regards to meteorology, would you say it's a career that you have to go into necessarily being comfortable, like being in the public eye, like being on the radio, being on the news, being on TV? Or do you think it's a career someone could go into and say, hey, I'm a little bit more reserved, I don't really want to be in the public eye, but I really do want to study meteorology?
Absolutely. There is a place for everyone, essentially. My job is very different as an operation or as a broadcast meteorologist because I am on TV. You do see my face, you do hear my voice. But when I was working as an operational forecaster, I was behind the scenes a lot of it. I was basically, on a computer. I would have some calls with some of our clients. They would call and ask just to clarify a forecast. If something was particularly in a particularly dangerous situation, they would call and ask, are we in the clear? I worked for the Department of Transportation was one of ours here in Newfoundland, actually, and or in St. John's, I should say. And they would call a lot because they would want to know, okay, is the snow letting up? Like, can we go out and clear the snow? That sort of stuff. So you don't have to be, your face doesn't have to be on anywhere. As an operational forecaster, even with Environment Canada, a lot of the people, for the weather or for Environment Canada in Gander, there's an office there, and you never see them, but you see their forecast every single day. But people can call, like as broadcast meteorologists, we can call Environment Canada, or whoever fills in for me can call Environment Canada and ask them some questions. So I'm not saying you would never talk to anybody, because you definitely will. But it doesn't have to be face forward.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
and then I know another thing we get asked a lot is career-wise, is it something that someone were to go in and study meteorology, is it something that they would really struggle with, job-wise, to be able to secure a job on the island if they wanted to stay in Newfoundland, if they wanted to stay rural versus metro versus, is it a job, I guess it's technically a two-part question. Is it a job that they could secure here on the island? And then another question we often get is a job that allows you to travel? Like, are you able to kind of hop around different parts of the province or the country or the world even?
Yeah, I think that totally depends on who you're working for. As a CBC meteorologist, I've worked in Yellowknife. Like I said, I've traveled a lot with that. I was in Iqaluit. My sister used to live in Kugluktuk, which is in Nunavut. And I was able to go to Whitehorse and, so I was able to travel within the CBC for sure. Here as well, I went to Labrador. I've been, to many places around the province. And so you definitely can. And even as an operational forecaster with AMEC, they had offices all around the country. So you could work in different areas, or if you want to move, it obviously completely depends on if they actually allow that. But it's there. If you're working with Environment Canada, there are offices all over this country. Like I said, there's Gander Weather Office. I know that they're looking for people, for meteorologists, for sure. There's a shortage in pretty much every field at this point. And then, like I said, there's all other variations. Like if you want to be working with Environment Canada, for example, as an operational forecaster, or you can go work in aviation, or you can work for NAV Canada, or you can work for, there's a lot of power companies that have meteorologists. There are a lot of insurance companies that have meteorologists. And here's a perfect example. Big hailstorms that happen in Alberta. They hire meteorologists to let them know when there's going to be big storm events so that they can have their adjusters out there ahead of time so that there's not a delay, have their best people out there. So nobody would ever think of that, right? You wouldn't think, oh, wow, but insurance is a huge moneymaker / not moneymaker.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's just one little part of, the job. There's so many more things you can do. But yes, with CBC, as far as weather events go, I would go to where the weather is for sure.
So anyone who was, wanting to pursue meteorology and stay local on the island, somewhere here in Newfoundland, somewhere in Labrador, it is very feasible for them to be able to get a job here.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, that
Oh,
wouldn't
that's
be an
good.
issue. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah. Again, there's a bunch of different private companies too, right? So you've got Wood now. I think Ocean hires meteorologists. There's a couple other, you can go work on an oil rig as a operational forecaster. So you'd be doing sea states, all that sort of stuff. But that would be the private company. And I think there's a bunch of other ways to be a meteorologist here. But Environment Canada is a good job. I mean, you get paid well. It's a government job. You get a pension. There's all that sort of stuff. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you get to stay within Newfoundland, though. They may, put you in other places. But I'm sure nowadays that's totally different. Most people work from home. So
Mm.
it's changed. The pandemic has changed everything.
That actually leads into my next question, which was with regards to COVID. When COVID hit, did everything for you and I guess your coworkers, did it move entirely online? Were you guys at home working from Zoom or Teams and I guess, does that mean that now, like if someone now or, in the future were to want to continue living in their rural community, but be a meteorologist, is that a potentially feasible option for them to be able to work remotely?
Yeah, I'm not sure how it works with the government. I do know that there are some people that are still at home. I think some can work in the office as well, but I think there are some of them that are still at home. For
Yeah.
me, I during the pandemic, that first, I think it was March 16th, I got sent home. And the thing is, I can do my job from anywhere as long as I have my phone and a mic and a computer with an internet connection. I can do it, a good internet connection, because I just have an app on my phone that brings me into it allows me to be connected to the studio here,
Mhm.
and they can talk to me. And so I was home for 2 years,
Wow.
and I did everything from home.
Mm.
And so I'm lucky in that sense. Now I'm back in the building, which is great too, because I missed
Right.
all of the people, and it's nice to be live in front of that green screen every night.
Right.
It's much
Oh,
easier.
yeah.
And yeah, so it's nice to be back. But yes, I do have the ability. If something's happening, breaking, weather in well, let's just say Port aux Basques, for example.
Mhm.
You go down there, I can do the weather from there. I can forecast from there. I can do everything as long as I have an internet connection.
Okay. I was wondering, so we actually have a question put in the chat from one of our students,
Okay.
which I'm also super curious about. So as a meteorologist, how has climate change affected your field of work? Have you noticed any major differences since you first began meteorology?
Yes. To be completely honest, I have. Growing up in Southern Ontario, we saw a lot of severe storms. I also lived in Ottawa, and I can count on one hand when I lived there, and this is not that long ago. What was that? 2012 to 2015, I lived in Ottawa. Not one tornado warning was ever issued. And you go back now, you look the last 5 years, they're saying Tornado Alley is moving.
Oh,
Canadian Tornado Alley, right over the Ottawa area. So that alone, those different types of changes, wind warnings in Ontario have gone up significantly since when I was a kid. And I'm not just saying that because a lot of us forget. We do forget the weather and what happens, but no, it's, they have gone up. More severe weather, certainly. And it's not necessarily that we're seeing more or stronger storms. We're just seeing it more frequently. We're
right.
seeing, now we're talking, and we can't really take one event and say, well, that's climate change. We can't do that. But we can say that the fact that we broke a heat record last year, almost to the
Mhm.
day here in St. John's, and yesterday again. So 2 years in a row, we cracked the record. So that will continue to happen, right? The weather will become more extreme. My job will become more important. because it will change from just letting you know when it's going to rain to potentially, life-saving forecasting, right? If people know, lead time is so important. If people know what's coming, they can prepare for it. And so climate change is going to affect my job for sure. The weather will become a news story more often than not. Weather, you think about it, weather affects, look at all the fires, right? That's weather related because it's dry, it's hot, it's humid. You want rain, it doesn't happen. So
and I guess that was my big, let me just make sure that that's not another additional question. Okay, no. And that's, I guess, my kind of thing, Ashley, like when it comes to climate change and things like that, like I know there was, I don't know if you saw this post, and I saw it listed a couple days ago, and it was very interesting to me because it was posted by a meteorologist here on the island, and it was a picture of like all the clouds and everything like that in central, I want to say it was central Newfoundland, and one of them almost kind of looked like a funnel cloud.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, that's so scary. Like my immediate, and I immediately thought of, oh my gosh, I need to talk to Ashley about this when I chat with her.
Yeah.
Is it, because I know a lot of people when they come here, I'll have people ask me all the time who've never been to Newfoundland, what do you guys have with, with regards to like, natural disasters? Do you have tsunamis, earthquakes, tornadoes, twisters, flooding, that kind of stuff? And I've been really lucky and really privileged, like since I'm from Newfoundland originally, and I left and lived away for a while. But when I came home, out of all those times, we've had bad snowstorms, we've had some flooding, but knock on wood, we haven't seen a lot of, like, I've never seen a twister or tornado. We're not on any fault lines that I know of. So, but is that to kind of say like climate change could change those things? Like, I guess is my question.
Yeah, it absolutely could. Anytime you change the environment, the weather environment, things will happen, right? So here's a perfect example. Fiona in Port aux Basques. The ocean temperatures were, I think it was 3 to 5 degrees warmer than they typically would be for that time of year.
Wow.
And hurricanes need warm oceans. That's one of their fuel sources.
Right.
So that's typically why we see these storms transition to extratropical when they get here. So that really doesn't mean much, to be honest. It just means that instead of getting their fuel from the ocean, they're getting their fuel from the environment. But Fiona had an extra, I think it was 500 to 800, I think it was 800 kilometers of warm water, of warm fuel to keep it tropical and keep it, fairly strong when it got here. If that water wasn't that warm, it wouldn't have been as strong. So that is a factor of climate change, right? So if we start to see that, we start to see those warmer waters, we start to see those storms moving up and they're not losing steam. Mm-hmm. That's not a good thing, right? I mean, there were other factors in that. It had combined with a trough of low pressure, or a cold front, I should say, and it still kept its strength. But those are the types of things that I'm talking about. These heat warnings. I mean, heat warnings were few and far between.
Yeah.
Right. And now we're seeing them. That is just a normal summer. Right. And we'll continue to see that. Ice patterns up in Labrador, less ice. That changes the way of life for many people in the north. So it may not necessarily. Okay. What's another thing? Species in the ocean. As the ocean warms, there are certain species that can't survive in warm water. So is that going to change things? Yeah. So it's not necessarily just weather. It really does play a role in everything. But yes, will climate change affect our weather? 100%. How? We don't know yet. But it will eventually. Right. But I do think it will be that we see more severe storms. And the other thing that people don't understand, the difference between weather and climate change, weather and climate. Weather is your day to day. So day 0 to about day 5, that's weather. Climate is on like a 10-year scale. Right. So the climate will affect the day-to-day weather. Right. So that's the difference. So that's why I say we can't just say one event is climate change, because it's a trend. Right. It's what you see in a long period of time. And that's so interesting. Like we have a lot of students that live, across Newfoundland and Labrador who live in
a lot of coastal communities. And a lot of times we have, like, for example, I was speaking to a family friend of mine who's a fisherman who works out on the boats, and he was talking about how, like, it's so different because when he was growing up, lobster wasn't really a big thing here. But now that it's gotten so much warmer, they've kind of started to migrate up from Maine to around here. And it's one of those really interesting things where I think, the time that we're living in now, like you mentioned, heat waves, like I don't ever remember when I was younger, it ever getting this hot. So it's interesting to see. And I think within meteorology, I can only imagine how, like, obviously awful, but how interesting it must be being able to follow all those trends.
Totally. And just speaking of that, like changing climates, most of us don't have air conditioning because you never needed it, right?
Yeah.
So now we're going and planning, like city planning or engineering, all that sort of stuff, building buildings that need to be hurricane proof, right? Those sorts of things, floodwaters, that, city planning in general, like
Yeah.
where's water going to be if we get an event? Look at Nova Scotia. Look what just happened in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
Right. And so these are all things that as the weather changes, as our climate changes, we have to adapt to it, and all of our careers are going to adapt to it. And yeah, it's a thing. It's definitely a thing, and we're seeing it happen pretty fast.
Yeah.
So
No, it's so interesting. And I think, like, for students that are interested in studying the weather and the climate and weather patterns, like, I know a big thing here that we have a lot of, I've heard a lot of people comment on, is how frequent thunderstorms are getting here. Because I know growing up, it was not really a thing. And I spent a summer in Ontario when I was younger, and I was blown away by how common they were.
every day almost. Yeah.
Yeah, and I personally, growing up, and even kind of still to this day, I was terrified of thunder and lightning. Like, it would happen, and growing up, it would happen every blue moon. And then in Ontario, it was like you said, it was almost every day.
Yeah.
So it's definitely interesting to see those shifts happening. So I'm always curious, like, when it comes to the younger generation, we have a lot of students who are, kind of starting to see this as the norm, which is very interesting to me, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in my 30s, and I'm like, that was not the norm when I was, a teenager or younger, right? So
Yeah.
very interesting.
It is. Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And it will continue to change. But again, that's climate change, right? You look at the patterns from the last even 10 years to the decade before that, to the decade before that. And we are warming. Our province is warming. So it's happening.
Sorry, we just had another couple questions come in from a student.
Okay. Yeah.
So this person gave us a couple questions, and actually they're quite good. So the first one is, can you predict how harsh the winter will be by how the summer weather was?
Oh, that's a great question. So it's not that simple, but there are bigger patterns in the atmosphere that kind of give us an idea of what's going to happen over the next couple of years. Now, again, it's not whether we're going to see, I can't tell you that on Wednesday, November, whatever Wednesday is it's going to snow. I can't tell you that, but I can tell you by looking at the bigger patterns. I'm sure most of you have heard this word El Nino and La Nina. They are large scale weather patterns that essentially affect the jet stream and what's going to happen. So right now we are in an El Nino year. El Nino has strengthened significantly. That typically means we see a lot of hot summers in places. This is when we will see a lot of fires, a lot of extreme heat waves. All of this is happening. And what that means is the ocean off the Pacific coast near the equator is warm. So that's pushing monsoons a little bit further east. That's introducing more rain into the atmosphere. It pushes the jet stream a little bit further north on the west coast of the island. West coast of Canada, of North America. And then it introduces the jet stream being a little bit more variable. And what that means is you'll see colder patterns and warmer patterns, and they essentially stall out. So this is when you'll see really big periods of cold weather in parts of the US or in Canada, and then parts of, the rest of the country seeing really warm air. So what this means typically in the winter time is you see a milder winter. So we can definitely, anticipate a milder winter. It's not really the case for Atlantic Canada. At least they say it isn't. But just judging by the last 10 years, for example. And I know that's a very short period of time,
Mhm.
but anytime that we've been in a El Nino situation, we tend to see milder winters
Right.
and mild, cooler summers, I should say, because we started off really cool, and it's really only in the last couple of weeks that it's been hot. Um, but again, it's all that pattern. It's where is a ridge of high pressure sitting? If that ridge of high pressure is stuck there, like it was earlier this summer, we were getting constant onshore winds,
Mhm.
which kept temperatures cooler here, but it was warm in other parts of the province, right?
Yeah.
So, so anyway, El Nino, these large scale weather patterns will gives us an idea anyway of what
Mhm.
to expect through the winter. Now here, um, it doesn't mean we're not going to get snowstorms or big snowstorms or anything like that, because that's still very possible. It just means that overall, over that period of 3 to 6 months, but 3 months through the winter, it will be warmer than what we would typically see.
Okay. And then, so their next question is, what is the median pay yearly for your profession? I don't know if
I
that's a
think
tricky question to answer, but
yeah, that's a tricky question. I have no idea what the median. You can look that up because it depends on where you work.
right.
Um, I know I mean, what was this, 10 years ago? 12 years ago, I started as an operational forecaster. I was making like $40,000 a year. So it's not much, but
Mhm.
I'm sure that's changed now. But you can go up with the government. You could be making up to over $100,000 a year
Well,
as a forecaster with Environment Canada. And then obviously, with TV, it totally depends on your situation. If you are a reporter or you're on assignment a lot, and there's many different scales that you can be on. And I know, like, private companies, I don't know, I have no idea what it would be
mhm.
now, but I'd say, you make a good living. You make a decent living for sure.
Good to know.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then the last question that was posted was, how many years of post-secondary education did you need, or like
So
is
I
required?
Yeah, it's required. So I did my journey a little differently because I wanted to be at home, to save a bit of money to get into university. So I did my degree in physics, which was 4 years, and then I did my certificate in meteorology in York University in Toronto. So I was only in Toronto for a year versus being in Toronto for 5 years.
Mhm.
Um, you can do earth and atmospheric science, and I think it really depends on where you go across the country. But at York University, typically people, it would take them 2 years to do their certificate program, sometimes because courses weren't offered, or, it's also very heavy in math and science. And people find it fairly tough to get that thing done in 1 year.
Right.
But because I had a degree in physics, it wasn't impossible for me to do it in a year. So I
Right.
did. Because most of the courses that I took, in fact, I had already taken
Right. Okay.
so it kind of worked out in my favor.
Yeah.
That actually, I think it was 2 courses I didn't have to take because I had already had credit for it. So, there's that sort of thing. So really, you just have to kind of look into it, but expect anywhere from 4 to 5 years to become a meteorologist.
Okay. So it's totally feasible for somebody if they wanted to, say, for instance, do a degree at MUN and then leave the island and go to York, or find, do something like that. So they totally fine for them
Yeah,
to start at MUN.
totally. Yeah, I would do a degree in physics, so the thing is the first year Earth and atmospheric science is identical to first year physics.
Oh,
Um, so, so you can figure that out too if you want. Dal offers meteorology, Earth and atmospheric science, so
oh,
that's
cool.
fairly
Okay.
close.
Mhm.
Good, I almost went there.
Nice. Okay.
And yeah, so there are many options. McGill offers a program, I believe the University of University of Alberta. Is that a university? I think it is. And I believe that BC also offers a meteorology program. So there's many places you can go if you want to go somewhere different, or if you want to stay home. That's up to you.
Love it. Okay, that's
Mhm.
great.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, just for the two students that posted, or any of the students that posted questions, if you could, oh, actually, I think I see your names there. I was gonna say, I want to make sure you guys get your points. Whenever they ask questions and they engage, they get points. So
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for all of your questions, everyone.
Mhm.
Before we clue things up, I'm actually just going to go ahead and share our hoodie QR code. Let's just get that up there now. Okay, everyone. So this is our QR code, as you can see here. Go ahead and give this a scan. This will also be posted as part of the recorded video when we put it up in the Clubhouse and on YouTube. But go ahead and scan this. It's going to ask you for super quick details like your name, your email, and then that way you're going to be entered into a draw to get a hoodie. And if your name is picked, you can decide, do you want the black with the white letters, or do you want the white with the colored logo? It's totally your call. So go ahead, give that a scan. If you've missed any of this presentation, like I said, you can always check. It's going to be loaded onto the Clubhouse and YouTube. I want to say within the next half an hour to hour, so you can pop on, take a look. And if you missed the last presentation with Callie Stone, please take a look as well. And then our next one is going to be with Melissa Barton on August 9th. So you can jump online, join. I think it's actually going to be myself, Melissa, and Trina will be here for that one. And yeah, so that's going to be that. Just going to clue up there. If anyone has any additional questions for Ashley, you can feel free to forward them to me, and I definitely can reach out to her and try to field any answers and get them back to you. But yeah, Ashley, I wanted to thank you for joining us today. It's amazing. I love, honestly, it kind of makes me feel like I'm like, maybe I can go into meteorology because it's so interesting.
It is,
yeah, it sounds amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful.
Awesome. Okay, take care. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Take care, STEM for Girls members. See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.